things to mention. I suppose the war on motorists continues unabated. Sadiq Khan doesn't care what people say about the expanded ULEZ zone. Now he wants you to drive slower, as they've expanded today even more 20-mile-an-hour zones in London.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'm all in favour of 20-mile-an-hour zones in the right place when they're in
around schools, maybe.
And so on. Yeah, around schools, obviously. But you know, as I understand it, these new plans, they involve a lot of arterial roads, the sort of main roads running in, out, and around London.
Yeah.
I mean, what you do when you sort of put those on a sort of 20-mile-an-hour limit, you start to encourage people to take rat runs, inappropriate sort of roads to avoid the main roads, because you can be sure, you know, that these arterial roads with 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, they'll be infested with cameras, but some of the side roads, you see, won't have the cameras. So, you know, if you're a motorist thinking, how can I get quickest around the city, you're going to start diving into all these side roads and thinking, well, I'll get there quicker and I'll escape the cameras that way. So it's completely counterproductive to carpet every road in an area with 20-mile-an-hour limits, and it should be done selectively, not. Do
you suspect, as many do, that this is not about so much slowing traffic down as just really trying to persuade drivers not to bother actually getting in the car at all? And because, quite frankly, if you're doing, I don't know how much you drive around the centre of town, but if you're driving at 20 miles an hour, you're literally getting overtaken by bikes, you're getting overtaken by scooters, you're getting overtaken by boats if you happen to be driving along the Thames. You know, it's ridiculous. So a lot of people will just go, if I can't drive any faster than 20, I might as well just not bother.
Well, I think this is a general sort of hassle feature, isn't it? I mean, Sadiq Khan is just trying to make life thoroughly miserable for motorists, so they sort of eventually give up and, you know, take the tube or walk or
which is what they want you to do. But
there are a lot of people who can't do that, of course. And we've spoken on this programme before about, you know, nurses, carers who work shift work, can't use public transport because it doesn't run in the middle of the night in where they need to go, or tradespeople who need to lug around tools and so on. You know, it's just absolutely making those people's lives
and it's making very, very difficult just driving in general. I was hearing from somebody who said trying to drive around Manchester's become a nightmare because in the end there's bus lanes you're not supposed to go in, there's some roads which you can only use at certain times, but if you're unfamiliar with it, as one man was in London, Roger Watts at OAP, he apparently spent about 4 hours driving around London, got lost during the rush hour. He was on his way to Dorset from his house in Norwich, and he ended up getting ULEZ fines in excess of 800 quid because he was just driving around not knowing where he was. And if you don't, I mean, I find this, even though I know London pretty well, if you find yourself at night in some areas where the crossroads are a bit confusing, you don't know where the bike lanes are, you don't know which lights you're supposed to be looking at, you don't know whether the traffic's coming towards you or going in the opposite direction. I mean, they've completely mangled traffic in this country.
Yeah, well, these sort of things, they're bad enough for people who live in London, but they're even worse in a way for people who live outside London.
But it's not just London. This is what I'm saying. It's other cities as well.
Yeah, and every city has its own individual scheme with own individual rules and its own individual payment system. And it's a complete nightmare, and the whole thing needs to be, you know, we need one national system of road tolls, which, you know, personally, you know, electric cars are going to sort of kill off all this revenue from fuel duty. What our government needs to do now is say, look, let's do away with fuel duty. Let's do away with road tax license, and instead let's have one system of national road pricing which works across the whole country, sends you a monthly bill, doesn't try and trap you in the way that these individual systems seem to try to do.
No, quite. But surely the problem with that, though, is that on top of all of the other taxes that motorists are paying, it becomes untenable, doesn't it? I mean, if you're going to start road pricing and you're going to do it per mile or whatever it is, whatever system you decide to adopt, then surely you have to give motorists a break somewhere else, don't you? You have to reduce fuel tax or something.
As I said, you should abolish fuel tax, abolish road fund licence, you know, give something back to the motorists in that way, and you know, have the road pricing instead, not as well as. I mean, that's how it is going to have to be sold to the public. Because if you're just slapping extra tax on people, well, then not unreasonably.
Yeah, but I worry, Ross, that we have found ourselves now accepting that we as car drivers should be somehow the butt of all taxes, that we should somehow provide the government with money for the privilege of being allowed to drive a very expensive or a very cheap car around because you want to. You know, we're not living in some kind of dystopian, world where you have to get permission from the government to do anything, surely?
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, the sort of motorist being sort of picked out as a sort of a bogeyman who can be taxed to the hilt and treated miserably. And
I'm saying no, thanks.
And it annoys a very large number of people, and you get to a critical level where people aren't going to put up with it.
Right.
And that's what you get when you see these sort of people vandalising these cameras and so on, which I don't support, by the way. I mean, I'm against vandalism when it's done by Just Stop Oil Extinction Rebellion, and I'm also against it when it's done by people against ULEZ.
Yes. But you see, I mean, unfortunately,
unfortunately,
people are not as consistent as you are, Ross, because there are some people who think some forms of non-violent protest are fine, other forms of non-violent protest are not fine, and get you locked up.
Well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it does annoy me intensely when people apply different standards to their own cause than they do to other people's causes.
Yes.
But